So I know there are some bigger social media accounts, right-wing social media accounts, that prefer the straight-talking approach when they're talking to people. So I hope they'll appreciate me straight-talking with them. There are quite a few that still have their head in the sand about the Reform Party, thinking that it's going to be some kind of saviour. It isn't. And that's the simple truth of things. I'm very, very wary of political parties and their leaders ever since Boris Johnson promised the earth and delivered nothing way back in 2019. I'm wary. I watch every single thing that they do, because to me it's actions, not words, that mean things to me. So let's look at what Reform was doing before the election. Before the election, they were all patriotic. There was no mention of we shouldn't alienate the Muslim vote. There's no mention of that. But as soon as they got into power, as soon as they got into Parliament, all that changed. We started to see the true side coming out. That, Farage in that interview saying that mass deportations of illegal immigrants was a political impossibility, that we shouldn't alienate the Muslim vote, and that sort of thing. And those should be massive red flags for anybody. And I said this in Twitter the other day. Those two things should have been the turning point for every single British patriot at that point. They should have said, whoa, hang on a bit, buddy, what are you saying now? And withdrawn support for the Reform Party. I mean, support should have been withdrawn for the Reform Party the minute Richard Tice said that lot, because that lot is exactly what they think about us, isn't it? We're just an inconvenience to them. We're just this inconvenience every 5 years, that we're people that need to vote for them. So they think every 5 years we'll just throw them a bone and we'll feed them a load of false promises, and like idiots they'll keep voting for us. And there are idiots out there that will keep doing that. We've seen it. We've seen it with the Labour Party. We've seen it with the Tory Party. These tribal voters that don't think with their brains, they just vote out of loyalty and not out of what their parties are actually doing, their actions, which is just ridiculous to me. To me, you should be looking at a political party and their policies and hold them to those policies. And if they don't adhere to what you voted for, you don't vote for them next time. To me, that's just common sense, logical shit. But to some people, they just don't get the message. They're like in a relationship with an abusive partner. They keep going back to them because they think they can change them, because they think things will change in certain circumstances when they won't. Parliament is a pantomime. There's no true power there. The power lies with us, the people. Those 600 people in Parliament have power that we give to them. We consent to give them our vote, and that's what power they have. They take our power from us and they use it in Parliament to give us the things that we need and want. And you have to ask yourself, has that happened? Has that happened over the past 40 years? And I would say that's a resounding no. How many consecutive Tory governments did people vote for in the hopes that they would reduce illegal immigration? And what happened? Nothing happened. It increased rather than decrease, didn't it? Boris Johnson had every opportunity to stop the boats. He didn't do it. He had an 80-seat majority. He didn't use it for anything. He could have pushed any piece of legislation through Parliament he wanted and got those boats stopped, but he didn't do it, did he? And back to the Reform Party. And this was one thing. It was a tiny little thing that I noticed. And this was very telling, because I watch out for the little things. I watch for patterns in people's behaviour. Going up to the general election, Nigel Farage had 2 Union flags either side of him in his office when he was making his grand political speeches from his office. The minute that the general election was over and he got his position in Parliament, those 2 Union flags disappeared. And I bet not many people noticed that. Those 2 Union flags totally disappeared. And that told me everything I needed to know about Nigel Farage, that he was selling me a line. And I didn't trust the guy. I didn't trust the guy in the first place, to be honest with you. Especially when he talked about making Tony Blair the vaccine czar, and to be put in charge of the rollout of the vaccines in this country, that was a massive red flag, along with Richard Tice and David Bull talking about care workers and saying that they should lose their jobs if they're not vaccinated. Massive red flags for everybody in that circumstance. The only person really that is of any value in that party is Rupert Lowe. And everybody's getting behind Rupert Lowe. And the only reason Nigel Farage hasn't got rid of Rupert Lowe like he did with Ben Habib, because he was getting too popular, just like Rupert Lowe is because Rupert Lowe is a Member of Parliament. Nigel Farage can't get rid of Rupert Lowe yet, because if he got rid of Rupert Lowe, we kicked him out of the party and he became an independent candidate, he's reducing his power, isn't he? He's down to 4 Reform MPs then. That's the only reason Rupert Lowe is being allowed to get away with what he's saying about Tommy Robinson, about other things, about mass deportations of illegal immigrants, even though it's going directly against what Nigel Farage is saying. That is the only reason why Rupert Lowe is still in the Reform Party. Don't kid yourself about that. And yet the bigger YouTubers are just sticking their heads in the sand, thinking that Reform is going to change its spots and suddenly become a party of the working class and of the true patriots. They're not. They're establishment through and through. And we've recently heard rumours, rumblings about some sort of pact or merger with the Tory party. That in itself should be an instant cross across them and saying, nah, I'm done, I'm out. And any type of affiliation they want with the Tory party, that should be the end of any support from British patriots. Because they're just gonna have all the Tory wets and all those sort of people, the Liberal Democrats that were in the Tory party, come to the Reform Party, dilute it down, and it will just become a mainstream party like all the others. It already is a mainstream party in some respects, with Nigel Farage and Richard Tice at the helm, aren't they? And people just can't seem to see it because they somehow this tribalistic cult-like mentality has built up around the Reform Party so quickly that people aren't questioning what the Reform Party is actually doing. That they're putting these people on pedestals as if they're beyond criticism. Nobody should be beyond criticism. Our political leaders shouldn't be beyond criticism at any point. They should always be held to account. This is what has led us to this position we're in right now, where we've got this binary self-destruct system of the Tory party and the Labour Party that we've had for 100 years? And they've just slowly managed the decline of this once great nation, and they destroyed it. And yet people still want to go on that same track of becoming tribal voters for a particular party. That's not the way forward in any of this. It just isn't. It's not the way forward. We need new thinking going forward regarding political parties. If they don't do the job that they say they're going to do, you vote for somebody else in the next general election. That's how it should be. Not because you've got some kind of misplaced loyalty to them for some particular reason. That's rubbish. Absolute rubbish. And another thing that should be brought in, this is something else that needs to be brought in, that their manifestos that these parties put out need to become legally binding. If they don't implement their manifestos that they've basically said to the people, then there should be another general election. The power should always be with the people. The democratic vote should always be with the people to hold Parliament to account. And that simply doesn't happen. Every 5 years, we have all the usual excuses, all the usual flim-flam, all the usual rubbish promises, lies from these politicians. And then once the election's over, they just go back to how it was before the election. They just carry on fleecing us, milking us of our tax money, and just treating us like mugs, really. People in this country are just absolutely treated like mugs by the political class. We are stupid. There are MPs out there in Parliament, and I'm not just talking about one particular party, I'm talking about all parties, that are funding, that are actually paying for their heating bills on their second homes through our expenses, through taxpayer money, while we struggle here trying to pay our bills. That's how stupid we are as a people. That's how thick we are. And I'm talking about myself with this as well. We're all thick to allow this to keep happening every time. We should demand change, but we don't. We just sit back and just take it, keep taking it and hoping that some kind of saviour is going to come and save us. No saviour is coming to save us. It's going to be down to ourselves. And we do that by voting in a different way. We need to vote for a true grassroots party that isn't connected to any of the mainstream parties like the Reform Party is. The Reform Party has roots within Labour and Tory because it's taken in Labour and Tory MPs and councillors. So it's going to be tainted by that corruption, by that old, flawed, corrupt system. Anything born of that system is going to be corrupted by definition, isn't it? We need to change how we think. We need to stop sticking our heads in the sand and get our acts together. And while I'm on the subject, right, this is another thing that boils my piss. It really does, right? I understand why people do it, and, you know, I support it to some extent. The rallies, right, the marches. Those only work if you have the eye of the media, because the point of having a rally is to raise awareness of what you're saying. If nobody's listening, if nobody's reporting on it, and yeah, people can say, well, we've got citizen journalists. Well, that's not the point. They still don't have the same reach as the mainstream media, do they? They don't have that setup where they can reach millions of people at the minute. Not a lot of people actually are online. A lot of the normies aren't online. They don't see the truth. All they see is 24/7 what the mainstream media feeds them. And that's it. So that makes rallies irrelevant. Unless you have a rally in every town and city, like what the pro-Hamas scumbags do. They're in every town and city, every weekend, raising awareness of their cause. And that's probably the only positive thing about them. We need to take a leaf out of their book and do exactly the same thing. We need to be in every town, city and village. There's no point in going down to London every, 4 months and having a rally and saying, yeah, pat ourselves on the back, we did really well there, because it's lost. Nobody talks about it, do they? It's forgotten, it's gone. And it doesn't achieve what it's supposed to achieve. At one time, 80s, 90s, if we'd have held a rally like that, people would have stood up and taken notice when we still had a free press. They would have stood up and taken notice of that. We don't have a free press anymore. The free press is propaganda now. It's taken over by the big corporations, and they just pump out what the establishment wants them to pump out and ignore anything else. That's why you don't see it on GB News. You see they misrepresent the rallies on GB News, and that's supposed to be the news station of the people, and it's not, is it? That even GB News paints the rallies in London as being far right, and they try to misrepresent what happens at them, don't they? We have that instance from the last one where they associated the people from the left, the counter-protest that were being arrested. I think it was 70 individuals, but they had a picture of Tommy Robinson saying the Tommy Robinson rally. They didn't mention the counter-protest. So even GB News is skewed and pumping out misinformation about the protests. And let's face it, if you're going to go down to London on a weekend outside the House of Parliament, you're shouting at an empty building because there's nobody in it. They've all gone home for the weekend. There's nobody in there. You're protesting an empty building. And if you go into 10 Downing Street and you start shouting out there, Starmer isn't going to hear you. He's in a nice, soundproof little box, and he doesn't give a shit about you. He couldn't care less. He couldn't care less if there's 100,000 people at his gate chanting that they want him to step down from power. He doesn't care, because he knows that he's got you over a barrel. He just doesn't care at all. He's not bothered. And I see this as well, I'm getting this all off my chest. People saying that, why doesn't the King step in? Why doesn't the King dissolve Parliament? Because the King is a WEF stooge. He's part of it. He's a globalist, just like Prince William is. They all are. They're in it. No help is coming from the King. No help is coming from Parliament, because it's corrupted, it's compromised, it's done. Look at Prime Minister's question times. It's an absolute joke. Keir Starmer isn't being held to account like Boris Johnson was. I can't stand Boris Johnson, but look at what happened with Partygate. Look at how many of the other parties in Parliament were holding him to account over that. Every Prime Minister's question time, they were hounding him about it. Is that happening to Keir Starmer? No. Look at Reform Party, their questions at Prime Minister's question time, benign. Absolutely benign. Pointless questions. Instead of hitting him with hard questions and hard facts all the time, putting him on the spot and making him squirm on that seat, he's not getting any of that. He's just sat there. And, he may as well be sat in his own living room. He's that comfortable, isn't he? It's a joke. An absolute joke. Anyway, I've got all this finished. I've had an epic rant. I'm done. But people need to take their heads out the sand on this subject of hoping and praying that reform is going to be the saviour. They're not. We've got 4 years and we need to start building up a true grassroots party. And for my money, and I know people aren't going to like this, I'm going with UKIP on this. And I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, you're going to split the vote, you're going to split the vote. I don't care. It's my vote. I vote for who I like, and you vote for who you like, in my opinion. But all I can see is if Reform get into power is a lot of people being disappointed because Nigel Farage is no Donald Trump. If you want to make an equivalence to somebody being like Donald Trump in this country, you've got to look at Rupert Lowe. That's the equivalent of our Donald Trump in this country, is Rupert Lowe. And unfortunately, Rupert Lowe isn't in the driver's seat of the Reform Party. I wish he was. A dream team for me would be Rupert Lowe and Ben Habib in the driver's seat of the Reform Party. That's my dream team. And if that happened, say in the next 4 years, Nigel Farage steps down, Ty steps down, which I don't think they will, then yeah, I will vote for Reform because that's the team going forward that I want to see. I want to see Rupert Lowe and Ben Habib in charge of the Reform Party. But it's never going to happen because you don't have any democracy within the Reform Party. Nigel Farage is the head honcho. You've got no physical way of removing him from being leader of the party at the minute. You've got some bastardised system of where you vote to petition the board to ask Nigel Farage to step down as leader of the party. You, as subscribers, because you're not members, only members of a political party can be members. You're just subscribers to a limited company at the minute. And Ben Habib has explained all this about the Reform Party becoming a true political party. It can't happen. For it to happen, the Reform Party has to dissolve and come back and form again as a political party. It can't just swap. So you've got no control about who's the leader of your party at the minute. You're just subscribers. You're like subscribing to a YouTube channel. You can press that big subscribe button. You can give them X amount of money every month, but you've still got no say in how that channel is run or what content goes on that channel. And it's the same with the Reform Party. You've got no control in what direction it goes. And the only way you can get that control is if you start voting with your money. You start withdrawing support for the Reform Party and state why you're withdrawing support, and then maybe, just maybe, they'll take notice and change tack. That's the only way at the minute. And in my opinion, there needs to be more parties, right-wing parties, because at the minute, Reform Party are getting very, very complacent. They think, we're the only party they can vote for, so we've got it in the bag. We're guaranteed to get into Parliament. And no party should have that mentality. There should always be other options to keep them in check, and that would be UKIP. If there's another right-wing party where if Reform Party don't toe the line, they've got it in the back of their minds that if we don't do what these people want, they're going to defect and they're going to go to UKIP and they're going to vote UKIP and we're going to be out of power. That's how we keep these political parties in check, by having unlimited options for us to vote for. Having a very narrow voting option isn't very good, is it? Look at what we've had in the past. Labour and the Tories. They're the only two parties you could legitimately vote for and think about getting into power, isn't it? And it hasn't done the country any good just having that two binary system, has it? and it won't do us any good just having the Reform Party and the Labour Party to choose from, would it? We'd be in the same boat yet again. Anyway, I've rambled enough, I've ranted enough. This is Vindicator, sign off. Have a good weekend.